Hey, so today we're going to do something I think is really useful. We're building a kind of syntax bridge between two totally valid forms of English. Now, let's be super clear from the start. This isn't about correcting anyone. The goal here is just to explore some common differences to help make communication in international settings even smoother for everybody.
So what exactly are we looking at? Well, the term is Filipinism, and all that means is a word or a phrase that's a hallmark of the English spoken in the Philippines. It's its own unique, awesome, and valid dialect. We're just going to look at a few common examples today to, build that bridge to American English phrasing. Think of it as adding a new tool to your communication toolkit.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the main idea, building that syntax bridge. Then, we'll dive into some real-world examples for making plans and for work. And finally, we'll wrap it all up into a handy little toolkit for you.
Okay, I really want to land this point. This is not about fixing something that's broken. Not at all. It's about code switching, having the skill to adapt your language depending on who you're talking to. It's just another powerful tool in your communication arsenal.
Okay, let's get practical. We're going to start with two super common examples that you've probably heard or used a million times when you're making plans or just explaining what you're trying to do. So let's say you need to schedule a meeting. It's for the Friday of this week. How would you ask someone if they're available? Just take a second and think about how you'd phrase that. In Filipino English, a very natural way to say it is, "Are you free this coming Friday?" But in standard American English, you'll almost always hear it shortened just a little bit to, "Are you free this Friday?" So what's going on here? Well, in American English, that word coming is seen as a little bit redundant. Why? Because saying this Friday already tells you it's the immediate one that's on its way. It's a tiny tweak, but it really shows a preference for being as concise as possible. Okay, let's try another one. Imagine you need to ask a coworker for help with something, and you want to explain why you need that help, what the goal is. How do you link those two thoughts together?
So you might say, "Can you help me? For me to finish it today?" And that makes perfect sense. But the more common American English way to phrase it is to connect it all into one smooth sentence. "Can you help me so I can finish it today?"
The thing is, for me too, is often a literal word-for-word translation. It works, but using "so I can" is just a more natural-sounding way to connect the action with the purpose in American English. It just creates a better flow between the two ideas.
All right, let's switch gears a bit. We're moving on to our next section, where we'll look at some language you'd hear in the workplace, and we'll even tackle a common idiom. Okay, back to the office. You need some support from a coworker on a project. Let's say you're putting together a presentation. What's the go-to word you'd use to ask for that support?
A common and polite way to phrase this is, "Please assist me to prepare the presentation." And while everyone will know exactly what you mean, the more direct, everyday American English version would be, "Please help me prepare the presentation."
This is one of those subtle things. In day-to-day conversation, help is just way more common. Assist sounds a little more formal. And usually, if you do use assist, you'd pair it with the word with and a verb that ends in ing. So you'd say, "Could you assist me with preparing the slides?"
Okay, last one. And this one's kind of fun. Think about a friend, or maybe a coworker, who is taking a tiny little problem and blowing it way out of proportion. How would you describe what they're doing?
You might say something like, "He's making it like a big deal." But the standard American English idiom has a really specific structure. You'd say, "He's making a big deal out of it."
And this is a perfect example of how idioms work or don't work when you translate them. This phrasing is often a direct translation of the Filipino idiom, ginagawa niyang big deal. Idioms are tricky because their structure is totally fixed. The American English one just has its own unique little pattern that you have to follow. Wow, we've actually covered quite a bit of ground. So let's pull all of these ideas together in a quick recap so you can pop them right into your communication toolkit. So here are the 4 big takeaways. Ready? When you're making plans, just drop "coming." When you're explaining your purpose, try "so I can." When you're asking for support, "help me" is your best bet. And for that over-the-top drama, it's making a big deal out of it. Simple as that. And look, why does any of this matter? Because mastering these little adjustments can really make a huge difference. It helps your English flow with that much more confidence and smoothness, especially when you're in an international setting where people might be expecting these specific patterns. At the end of the day, language is all about building bridges. Today, we looked at a few ways to strengthen the one between Filipino and American English. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what communication bridge are you going to build next?